Questions presented during the following program were compiled by media representatives from the Cupertino Courier, Cupertino Neighbor, and the San Jose Mercury News. The City of Cupertino does not take responsibility for the editorial content. The City Channel presents Meet the Media, a 5-part series featuring each of the candidates running for Cupertino City Council. As part of our ongoing coverage of the Cupertino City Council race, this series has been designed as an up-close and personal introduction to each candidate. Tonight's featured candidate is Steven Haze. Mr. Haze, a 42-year-old manufacturing consultant and co-founder of Oaks, the organization advocating keeping St. Joseph's as open space, will be interviewed by Mike Betz, editor for the Cupertino Courier, Annie Belt, reporter for the Cupertino Neighbor, and Michael Cronk, reporter for the San Jose Mercury News. City Council candidate Steven Haze's interview now begins with a question from Mike Betz.
Mr. Haze, during your campaign, you've discussed the concept of an economic development program for the city. How would this program work and what does it involve?
Well, one of the things I like to do, similar to the City of Mountain View, is look at within government is the establishment of an economic development department, and if possible to look at having assigned an individual who could be focused on what would be the ability for us to develop in our community as it relates to economic issues. As we all know, most recently Tandem and Apple have announced and actually are going through a number of layoffs. Also, Symantec, a smaller sized company, has announced the fact that they are going to move to Eugene, Oregon, approximately 275 of their employees. I've also been on Stevens Creek Boulevard at a restaurant and asked what has been the impact to their business, and they've indicated that they've seen a decrease of business of approximately 15%. So as a result, it seems it's quite imperative that we look at ways in which we can keep our companies here, maintain their competitiveness, and not impede their ability to do business in our community. So the purpose of the economic development program is to look at working with the Chamber of Commerce, De Anza College, and city government, and see in what ways we can promote business opportunities in our community, but at the same time ensure that we are not affecting the citizens of our community.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Haze, does the general plan need to be amended? If so, how?
I've participated over 3 years, first as a member of the Citizen Goals Committee, in which myself and other members of the community were involved in a visioning of the future of our city. Now, I had a lot of things that I would have liked to have seen occur as it related to the general plan. Many of the ideas that were formulated during the Goals Committee were carried forward and discussed at the Planning Commission level and City Council level. And it was in June of this year that the City Council finally adopted the general plan. Along the way, there were many items or components of the general plan that I supported. At the same time, those were not necessarily approved by the City Council. We have an opportunity to amend the general plan on 2 occasions each year. So for those elements of the general plan that are quite significant in nature, such as the diocese property or such as the hillside protection policy, those would be candidates for amendment for the general plan. Again, as I mentioned previously, I believe that the economy and jobs here in Cupertino is the #1 issue. And what that deals with is the quality of life for all of us. A substantial amount of revenue for the city comes from sales tax. And so if businesses are hurting, if jobs are leaving our community, then it means that we're going to see an impact on government and the services that are provided. And just most recently, the fact that library services have been curtailed is a good example of how the economy is starting to affect us locally. Now, as far as the general plan be amended, I have my ideas of where it could be amended, but I look at it as enhancements. The Tier 2, for example, talks about traffic mitigation and the fact that any increase in density that the companies create because of the 2 million square feet has to be fully mitigated when it comes to traffic. However, for housing, they only have to mitigate a portion of the demand, additional demand for housing. It's in those areas that we can do more. As far as flexibility in zoning, I look for areas such as Banley Street and Bub Road area. This is areas that have also been stated by the council as being opportunities to go from, say, industrial or strictly industrial to where it can be mixed use or housing. So at this point in time, I don't see there to be a threat as it relates to the general plan, and the company is coming forward to the council in the near term and suggesting or coming with their proposals requesting additional increase in growth.
Mr. Haze, what's your position on the heart of the city, the concept that's proposed in the general plan to create a cultural and business activity center along or near Stevens Creek? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that's realistic? What would you do as a council member to see it done or not done?
10 years ago, when the 1980 general plan was being reviewed, there was an interest among the citizens, including myself, to address what today in 1993 is called the heart of the city. I've been a resident for 15 years, and the whole time I've seen the transformation of this community go from rural to where it's now the headquarters for 3 companies. And we've had very explosive growth in the last 15 years. It's only been most recently that growth has actually flattened out, and what we now have is an opportunity to go back and reassess what we have accomplished and what our deficiencies are. To date, what we have is now a number of buildings that are being underutilized. These are the ones that are under 10,000 square feet. We see companies that are going through consolidation, such as Apple at the Gateway headquarters. And so, as a result, it means that we can now turn back and redirect our efforts into what is called today the heart of the city. The Stevens Creek corridor is a great opportunity, working with De Anza College, Community College, working with the Chamber, working with our larger employers, and creating a modest retailing area that would allow for small companies to prosper with retailing opportunities that the citizens and the workforce for these other companies to be able to go to this would generate the sales tax revenue that we desperately need in order to keep our libraries open, in order to do the street maintenance required, and also to look at other opportunities to improve services that the city offers.
Mr. Haze, during your campaign, you've talked about getting neighborhoods involved in the governmental process earlier. How would you go about doing that?
Well, what I've tried to do to date is to see what is it that has neighbors come out, using as an example the Monte Vista hardware site in the proposal from Mid-Penn Housing Coalition. Just to give a little bit of background, Terry Brown, I believe, was the property owner and was looking to construct a mixed-use development of I believe it was 20 townhomes, approximately 15,000 square feet of retailing, and 10 senior citizen rental units above that retail. And the adjoining neighborhood was very involved with that process, but it was a little bit after the fact. And it was where there was a development proposal. What I would like to see is an opportunity when there is a significant development proposal that the developer is entertaining, that they actually go out and, say, poll or solicit the neighbors. And I think it's really important so they understand what the issues are that the neighbors are confronted with every day. It could be traffic, it could be noise, it could be pollution, or it could be visual. But what's really important is to have, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit developer, is to go out there as early as possible at more of the conceptual stage and solicit the residents and get their input, because it could be quite valuable for them. And I think there's also a need for council, whomever is sitting on the council, to try to communicate to the residents what the true issue is. When, again, using Monte Vista as an example, there was a mix-up or a nexus created between community development block grants and a request for approval for those versus a development proposal, a specific development proposal. And so when the council did finally vote on it, they voted really as a reaction to the concerns of the neighbors, but they weren't voting on what the real issue was or real proposal, which was whether or not to retain the CDBG funds. So to me, it is important is to try to get out there, whether it's the developer or whether it's the council or the staff, as early as possible, and to allow ways to include the citizens.
Thank you.
Mr. Haze, Cupertino is one of 8 cities in Santa Clara County that, as of June 1993, has not complied with the California Affordable Housing Law. Do you support affordable housing in Cupertino? And if so, how would you resolve neighborhood opposition to a sound affordable housing project?
Well, obviously I touched upon that subject in greater detail already, but I'll expand on that. Number one, I participated in joint venture Silicon Valley on what's called the Physical Environment Committee, in which we developed 2 initiatives. One was housing and the affordability of housing, and the other was sustainable communities. What type of community do we want in the 21st century? Subsequent to my participation on that committee, I also was involved in what's called the Housing Action Coalition, which is sponsored by the Santa Clara County Manufacturing Group and includes on the coalition individuals from obviously the development community, architects, but it also includes housing advocates, environmentalists, interested citizens. And what we're trying to do there is to see what are the opportunities as it relates to housing and affordable housing. And the word affordable has been used, shall we say, as hyperbole, okay? And it's been exaggerated to put in people's minds that when you say the word affordable, that you mean something that is federally subsidized, high-rise, and of poor quality, and totally ignores the concerns and interests of the surrounding neighborhood. Now, one of the tenets of the Housing Action Coalition that's stated is that there is strict criteria as far as what type of proposal they would support if they were requested. So if Midpen was to come to the Housing Action Coalition and ask for support, one of the key elements is the fact that they should have gone, as I mentioned in the prior question, gone to the neighbors and talked about it, so that if that proposal is to go forward, it does it where it takes into consideration the surrounding neighborhood. I am an advocate for affordable housing, but I look at it in a different way. It has to be done sensitively. It has to be done with full participation of those who would be affected by it, and it has to be good for the community. I haven't met anybody as of yet that doesn't want people to come into our community, but they want to be certain that when they do come into our community, that they are responsible, that they are as concerned as the residents here. And that's how I look at it.
Thank you.
Mr. Haze, what is your view of how the city manages its finances? Specifically, as you know, in recent budgets that have been adopted, they have dipped into the reserve this year, fiscal year, $1 million to fund major capital improvements. Do you favor that practice if the money is in the reserve, or what would you do differently? In terms of what would you like to see the city do in terms of trying to match revenues and expenditures?
Well, unfortunately, Cupertino is not unique in the sense of having to dip into reserves if they're so fortunate, because of the fact that the state and the county are chasing after limited dollars and after going through the 80s in a deficit basis. Now, the state has to balance the budget, but somewhere along the line, they have to go out and either increase taxes or perform cutbacks. And in the last 2 years, they've been performing a significant amount of cutbacks, and thus that's how they comply with the state constitution requirement of balancing the budget. Unfortunately, there's say a middleman in between, and that's the county. And the county is where most of the services are provided on a local basis. For the city of Cupertino, when we talk about services, we talk about garbage, we talk about water, we talk about street improvements or maintenance. We contribute some funds to the library. But it's been primarily the state in providing monies to the county, and then the county providing badly needed services. Now, what I'd like to do is to try to avoid getting involved in that type of wrangle. I am, as a matter of fact, today sent a letter to Governor Wilson as a candidate from Cupertino, a request that he sign without any unnecessary delay Senate Bill 566. This will allow for special assessments based on simple majority for libraries in this particular case, and I am in support of that. I think what we need to do is to have more local control on those types of services that we've come to expect to be provided by government, and library services is one of those. As far as the budget itself, the reserves themselves, I see that as an ability for us to perform long-term improvements. It can be an augmentation, and I believe the council, again, using the library as an example, to augment a shortfall. But what I would like to see, and it would be probably quite unusual, is that 1 year from now that the commission hands over a check for $50,000, and because of programs that they were able to implement, they don't need the money any longer. That would be different. And what that means is that we're investing rather than just spending. And that's very important to draw a distinction from. The reserve is for a rainy day. It should be there for augmentation. But at the same time, if there can be a cost benefits demonstrated, then we should look at it as for investment purposes. And it is certainly, if we talk about the library, we're talking about for the good of our citizens as one of the basic services for our community.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Haze, the city manager has identified several areas that the city might want to look at in the future in terms of taxes. One of those areas is the documentary transfer tax for homes. That issue came up in the fall, and right now it's in the courts. If the courts were to come through and tell the city that they could in fact charge that, would you favor that?
Well, I happen to be at home watching the San Jose Real Estate Board bring out their troops in full force. And it was unfortunate because, again, I mentioned hyperbole or an exaggeration of what the amount of the transfer tax would be. But it sends out a strong message. And the way the economy is today, it's very important, is to try to avoid increasing taxes at all costs. The only time I believe it should be done is when, by a simple majority, the citizens state that we want taxes increased because of the benefits it will bring us. So the question is, how do you create incentives rather than what I see right at this time, disincentives? Transfer tax is an added cost, and the question is, where would the money go anyway? I think if we go back to government and how government operates, that's really how we're going to save money. I don't think the city is supposed to be in the business of making money, but the city has to provide services to its citizens. So as it relates to the transfer tax, I could not support that at this time.
Thank you.
Mr. Haze, if elected, how would you attempt to resolve the dispute over the Roman Catholic Diocese property?
As you may already know, I was one of the founders of OAKS organization advocating keeping St. Joseph as open space. That was a grassroots organization. Many of the members are from Cupertino and as well as the local area. When I was the chair, the first chair for that organization, we had conducted a number of discussions with the San Jose Diocese, as well as put together a video. And my interest at that time was to, one, understand what the problem was for the church. What was their financial needs? What was making them, at that point in time, have to sell the property? And during my tenure, I worked as diligently as possible in that effort. The video, if you've had an opportunity to see it, shows Father Eugene Boyle giving a presentation talking about the diocese position on the issue. At the same time, I had environmentalists give their position on the issue. But the key thing was to share that with the rest of the community. When I ran for City Council in 1991, that was not the only reason why I ran. It was a major issue. But what I tried to do during my tenure was to look at financial ways of serving the diocese needs and at the same time preserve the property as open space, because it's next to San Antonio County Park, which is one of the most popular parks in the county. But I have always felt that it was inappropriate to go to litigation on that issue. But if there were innovative ways, which was demonstrated, by the way, by the Parks and Recreation Commission, to identify sensitive environmental areas and to look at innovative ways of increasing the amount of open space. And if it meant it was a trade-off as it related to the number of homes, okay, which is described as density, but also the mass, which is described as density. But if the homes were much more modest in size, say 1,600, 2,000 square feet, 2,400 square feet, to me that was much better than seeing what could occur today, 41 luxury mini estates with their own private playground. That, to me, would not serve the public's interest. So as far as the diocese property, what I try to do is look at the economic, the legal, the environmental issues associated with it, and to see what would be a fair compromise.
The City of Cupertino would like to thank City Council candidate Steven Haze and media panel guests Annie Belt, Mike Betz, and Michael Cronk for their participation in this program. Election Tuesday is November 2nd. Vote for the 3 candidates best suited to serve on Cupertino City Council. And keep watching the City Channel for special City Council election programming. Throughout October, we'll be broadcasting this 5-part Meet the Media series. In addition to Meet the Candidate segments, featuring each candidate's political platform, tape coverage of the October 12th Candidates Forum, and our live Election Night Special. Refer to your free special election edition of the City Channel program schedule, now available at City Hall, the library, Quinlan Community Center, and the TCI cable office on Imperial Avenue.